everybody. So throughout today, I have been experiencing the worst of ADCs because I'm going to be blunt. I don't think ADC players are very smart at picking their items. So I decided, why not make a video talking about the top 20 most played ADCs and what items they should be going first into their builds. Before I go through this, and I have looked through all top 20 champions and come up with what I would recommend for them, even though I don't play the class, I think it's fairly reasonable that I can make recommendations. I do want to say two things. Static Shiv is pretty goddamn underpowered, and it's basically good on nobody. The advantage of Static Shiv in the past was that it was a cheap item that gave you wave clear and crit, so that once you built your Infinity Edge, you already had attack speed and crit to boost off it. The current Static Shiv is 3,000 gold, doesn't really give that good of stats, gives wave clear, but the thing is, most AD carries at this point have some form of wave clear. They haven't released an ADC with no forms of wave clear in quite some time. So that item is doing good on nobody, actually. Literally nobody. Kraken Slayer seems to be in a very similar category where it just really isn't that good as a first buy. Kraken Slayer seems to do decent later on. As a first purchase, it is terrible. So those two items I will recommend to nobody. Starting with Jinx, as we can see on Jinx, you guys did get a little bit smarter. Basically, Infinity Edge Rush on Jinx seems to do the best. If you can't Infinity Edge Rush on Jinx, then going for the Storm Razor seems to be your next best option. Despite me making fun of it, coming in at 2,700 gold, Storm Razor does seem to be a cheap item with some attack speed, some damage, the movement speed, and the on-hit damage coming from its on-hit thingy. That makes it a decent option to buy first if you just can't get to your BF Sword or something like that. Otherwise, though, Jinx rushing Infinity Edge seems to be doing the best for this character. Jinx, Infinity Edge, Storm Razor if you can't do that. For Kaisa, the option seems pretty clear. Storm Razor. Some people are rushing Rage Blade, and Rage Blade Rush has not been working. Its win rate is decidedly low. Fighting in and playing against it is just no good. Once again, Storm Razor is cheap, coming at 2,700. It sets you up with some good stats. Once again, you get that the on-hit movement speed to either chase down kills or to run away from people. Second item, now you could go Rage Blade, and that seems to do significantly better into doing potentially a Nashor's Tooth or one of these other on-hit items here. That seems to be your build. So Kaisa, Storm Razor Rush is your ideal play. For Ezreal, this one seems pretty clear looking at any stats here. And yes, I have analyzed these stats. Some of these are clear, some of these are not clear. I have looked at build paths on some champions. So there are some builds, yes, where you could do, for example, Essence Reaver into Mana Mune into Duskblade does decent on Ezreal. But overall, looking at these options, I think Trinity Rush is overall doing the best. So that's what I would recommend. But again, you can do Essence Reaver into Mana Mune, into Duskblade. That does seem to work. Duskblade will probably be nerfed here at some point. The other forms of Essence Reaver seem to get outperformed by Trinity. So if you're doing third item Duskblade and you're abusing that before it hopefully gets nerfed, that seems to work. Otherwise, Trinity. For Jhin, this seems pretty clear to me, and I think anyone who can read makes this pretty clear. On Jhin, you're either going to go Storm Razor or you're going to go Gale Force. Infinity Edge, despite being tantalizing as a rush item, just doesn't seem to do that good. If you can get to 3 items, it does seem to do decent, but the issue is you don't always get to the 3-item build on a champion. So, Infinity Edge into Rapid Fire Cannon into Storm Razor. This is a decent build, gives you movement speed, gives you poke, gives you that sort of thing. But if you want consistency, then you're either going to go with the Gale Force Rush or the Storm Razor Rush. That's my opinion. If you can get to that BF Sword and you can get to your Infinity Edge, then you can do Infinity Edge into Rapid Fire Cannon. Statistically, that does seem to be working. But again, you don't always get to your 3-item build, and you need to play around that. For Felix, this one's just pretty obvious right here. Storm Razor Rush, and once again, Storm Razor seems to be your ideal item. Unlike Static Shiv, which is doing terrible on everyone, unlike Kraken Slayer, which once again is doing terrible on everyone, Storm Razor coming in at 2,700 gold is an extremely cheap, affordable option for ADCs to build an item that allows them to kite back or kite forward, get some decent burst damage done with that magic damage nuke. The attack speed, the damage, it sets you up for a second item, which is typically going to be your Infinity Edge. That always performs pretty well. For Kog'Maw, this one should not surprise anybody. You're always rushing Rage Blade, 100% of the time, it seems. Blade of the Rune King can do decent, but with such a low pick rate, that basically means Rageblade is only slightly Blade of the Ruined King is only slightly outperforming Rageblade in best case scenarios. So in my opinion, if you can find a best case scenario for Blade of the Ruined King, then yeah, I guess it'll slightly edge out. But if you're uncertain in 99% of situations and basically all the time, you should just be going Rageblade. This shouldn't be surprising anyone because Kog'Maw is one of the few ADCs with a really good ability to use the extra phantom hits of Rageblade early on. So Kog'Maw basically should always be going Rageblade Rush. For Vayne, I'm going to be dead honest with you. This one was a bit hard to call because I'm going to be blunt. None of her builds seem to be doing good. However, last patch, Essence Reaver Rush was doing pretty decent on Vayne. And so despite the extremely low pick rate giving us no good stats, I would ignore these win rates because these pick rates are just so low. We're looking at 600 games, 500 games. That's nothing. But I'm going to go ahead and recommend them anyway because the thing is, and this is my opinion, I think that this was working last patch, and you should just go with an Essence Reaver. That's just my opinion. As we can see here, the Essence Reaver total build rate does seem to be doing good, but again, we're looking at 100 games, so there's just nothing really there to work with. In my opinion, Vayne's a little bit scuffed right now. Everyone's trying to force Rageblade, but the thing is, if you remember, Vayne's W was nerfed from 14% to 12% to now 10% health true damage. On-hit builds are not working on Vayne. So I think everybody needs to stop trying to hard force the on-hit builds and go back to more crit builds focused on Essence Reaver, focused on big Q hits. I think she can definitely salvage her win rate off that. And I think if people stop hard forcing, let's be blunt, some pretty terrible builds, that her win rate could probably go back to normal just doing Essence Reaver builds. For Caitlyn, this seems pretty obvious, and I think this should be obvious to everyone. Basically, Gale Force is good, Infinity Edge is good, and Storm Razor is good. Caitlyn seems to be one of the few AD carries who has multiple choices. They all have good pick rates. They all have good win rates. It depends on your situation. Are you going for executes? Gale Force. Are you just going for sustained damage? Did you get a good early game? Infinity Edge. This also gives you the big crits for your traps. Are you just do you not have that great of an early game, or do you want to snowball more? Then you can easily go with the Storm Razor. And once again, it's a cheap option, gives you the kiting ability. Depends on what you want. Do you want to kite? Do you want a cheap early game? Do you want to just massacre people on traps? Or do you want to go in for those executes? These are your three options. Caitlyn's pretty good at that. For Zaya, once again, we're looking at the Storm Razor Rush, or if you can do it, the Novari Quick Blades. Both these items are pretty much the same pick rates, but Storm Razor into Novari Quick Blades does seem to be edging out your other options. So either you could go Storm Razor into Novari Quick Blades, or Novari Quick Blades into Storm Razor. Now, of course, you could always try to do, this build seems to be doing decent right now as well. I mean, decent. You can do Storm Razor into Gale Force. Doesn't seem to be doing good, but these numbers are quite low, so the differences between them aren't really that big a deal. So if we look at her builds right here, we can see that, yeah, basically everyone's rushing Storm Razor into other options, but we can see Novari Quick Blades into Storm Razor into Bloodthirster does decent as well. It just seems to be, what is your situation? Do you need the early game? Because we're looking at 3,400 gold versus 2,700 gold. That's 700 gold. That's basically 5 minutes of farming difference. Maybe not that much, but maybe 4 minutes of farming difference. That can add up very quickly. If you have a completed item 4 minutes earlier, that's 4 minutes of it being in the game doing stuff that Novari Quick Blades isn't. Now, do you think that your Novari Quick Blades power spike will then compensate for it and do better? If you think so, then go with your Novari Quick Blades. Varus, he's another one of these characters. He can pretty much do anything. The Yoma's Ghostblade. Now remember, Varus has like 3 different builds, so it's hard to make calls here. All his builds seem to be doing good. His on-hit build is good. His lethality build is good. The only one that seems to be struggling is his crit build, but to be honest, I don't think... I think Riot made Infinity Edge a little bit intentionally underperforming to try to diversify ADCs. So for most ADCs, you'll find that their Infinity Edge build typically is underperforming a bit. I think that's by intention. Now, obviously, that's on all ADCs. Some like Caitlyn do amazing with Infinity Edge still. Varus, on the other hand, Rageblade into Hurricane seems to just be powering all the others into the ground. And I'm sure... let's see, we got Rageblade into Kraken Slayer, Rageblade into Hurricane. Both of these basically do fine. The thing with Kraken Slayer is good if you have Rageblade. Kraken Slayer on its own is terrible. The stats are low, they're laughable. Hurricane also seems to be doing good. Basically, on hit Varus, you know, pick and choose. In other words, yeah. That's just my opinion on this. I would not recommend, even with the stats being good, this goes into the low pick rate. What we're likely seeing here is people who picked best case Kraken Slayers on a very low pick rate, and they performed decently enough, but at only 1,100 games, we really don't have enough to get in good information. I would recommend, just by default, go Ginzo's Rageblade Rush. Lucian, Gale Force. These other items, we have good numbers of games on all these items. None of them seem to perform at the power level of Gale Force. Now, if you're looking for more of a late game build, you can obviously go with Navari Quick Blades, but this is just my opinion. I think Gale Force into Essence Reaver just seems to be his build. So that's just, I'm just gonna keep it short for Lucian. That's just what I would recommend. For Twitch, Blade of the Ring King Rush into Rageblade, or actually, well, no, I shouldn't recommend that so quickly. So basically, Blade of the Ring King into Rageblade into Hurricane is performing extremely good, because obviously this is a good synergistic build. Remember that Hurricane is not shown here, but Hurricane did get magic damage on hit, so we can see that there's a lot of synergy between these. Now obviously we also have Blade of the Ring King into Infinity Edge into Hurricane, which also does really good. Do you want on hit Twitch? Do you want crit Twitch? They both seem to be doing but I think overall we're seeing that this is pretty clear. Blade of the Ring King into Rageblade into Hurricane. This just seems to be his default build. Do not go Rageblade first. Despite the stats being decent, we're looking at a champion who's overperforming. That means he's overpowered right now. An overpowered champion will do good basically no matter what. The thing is, Rageblade is clearly not doing as good as Blade of the Ring King. So just go Blade of the Ring King into Rageblade. Don't think new item fun, just think win your game, right? Blade of the Ring King into Rageblade. Okay. For Draven, we see a lot of unique and interesting builds here that all seem to work. Basically, Essence Reaver Rush, as we've seen before, that's good. Good burst, good crits. Infinity Edge Rush, if you're ahead, I'm assuming. And also Bloodthirster all seem to be doing good. Then you sort of mix and match from there on. All three of those seem to be doing good. I'm not going to recommend Ghostblade because I'm assuming it's going to get hotfix nerfed here at some point. Same reason I wouldn't recommend Duskblade on Ezreal. I'm assuming these are going to be hotfix nerfed. So making a video where I recommend them wouldn't really make any sense. Zeri, I'm going to be honest, despite its lower pick rate, I'm assuming Zeri will eventually come out that Stormrazor ends up being her best item. That's what I'm assuming. So I'm just going to assume, based on what is working for other characters and based on her low win rate on the Shield Bow Rush, I'm going to assume for Zeri that Stormrazor will end up being her best item. The win rate will likely come down as the pick rate comes up, but we'll likely end up seeing Stormrazor coming out at about a 50% win rate, putting it noticeably above her other items. So for Zeri, and as we get into the less popular characters here, I'm going to have to make more judgment calls, just not look at the numbers. But for Zeri, I would 100% recommend just go, in my opinion, just go with the Stormrazor. For Samira, Shield Bow Rush and Infinity Edge Rush both seem to be doing good. The difference between the two seems to be, do you have an amazing early game? Then you can get that BF Sword, then you can get Infinity Edge. If you don't, then you can get the components, and then you can go into Shield Bow. We're seeing her build path here. Once again, we're looking at only a few hundred games, but we're seeing that some people are having success with the Collector, but I'm just not going to recommend that. Shield Bow into Collector into Infinity Edge is her most popular build right now. Good win rate. 400 games on that build is pretty low, but it seems to be doing good. So that's what I'm going to recommend. Shield Bow into Collector into Infinity Edge. That seems to be doing pretty good. For Ashe, I would recommend you don't play Ashe, but if you do, I would recommend Stormrazor. Once again, we're seeing an item that, despite the low number of games played, Stormrazor seems to be doing really good. Repositioning an Ashe has always been powerful. Until 2 items, I don't think there's a reasonable way on Ashe to, reasonably until 2 items, I don't think you can really start standing and just beating the shit out of people with items anyway. That's pretty much always been true. Outside of Kraken Slayer and hoping that your opponent has no mobility, Ashe has always needed 2 to 3 items before she can really hammer people down. So Stormrazor giving her mobility and a decent poke burst is pretty good. Going to our build path once again. I mean, I'm just trying to show, we're looking at not even 100 games here, so that's useless. So basically, these items are probably underperforming. Reasonably then, we could do a Stormrazor into Ginzo's Rageblade. Rageblade removes your crit, which makes you slow less, but then you've got the Stormrazor movement speed, and then The attack speed on your Q combined with Rage Blade will probably do a decent amount of sustained damage. Rage Blade is pretty overperforming right now, I'll be blunt. So I don't think it'll be nerfed until next patch, but if it is, then I would probably swap over to a crit build on Ashe. If it's not nerfed, then I would just stick with Rage Blade. Rage Blade is pretty goddamn overpowered right now. For Tristana, Stormrazor, once again. Her other builds seem to be underperforming a little bit. Not that much, but a little bit. Tristana seems to be the one character who Kraken Slayer Rush is actually doing decent on, but once again, we're talking about very low number of games. Stormrazor is probably going to do better, but Tristana does have really high attack speed, and just doing Kraken Slayer into Infinity Edge could maybe work. I'm not sure. We're looking at a very low number of games. I can tell you though that Stormrazor is pretty much a solid option to everyone. For Misfortune, everyone's trying every different build on Misfortune to very little success. Ghostblade is doing decent, but you have to remember we're only looking at 800 games, so this is basically irrelevant. For Misfortune, I'm honest to God not sure what I would even recommend on this champion. She doesn't seem to be liking the new items at all. I would maybe recommend Ghostblade, but once it gets nerfed, I'm not really sure. I'm really not sure. At some point, it does seem that Collector is doing decent. So fit Collector in somewhere, but don't rush Collector. Maybe Kraken Slayer into Collector into Infinity Edge? I'm not sure with Misfortune. This doesn't seem to be the best option. For Sivir, this should be a huge shocker. Navari Quickblade Rush seems to be doing good. Wow, I'm amazed. The character who can get a spell shield and then reduce that spell shield's cooldown by auto attacking might do good with Navari Quickblades. Wow, incredible, really. Then last up we have Callista, who doesn't seem to be doing good with Rageblade Rush, which makes sense because her on hits aren't really that good early game. But she also doesn't seem to be doing good with anything. So I would recommend not playing Callista until someone smarter than me comes up with a build for you. So that's it. That's what I would recommend for all the ADCs. Please stop trolling my games. Please build intelligently. No more static Shiv. And honestly, I would not recommend Kraken Slayer on basically anyone early game. You have a really good Stormrazor first item. That's what Riot intended it for. It's cheap. It gives kiting. It's good. Okay, some champions can do other builds. That's fine. Please stop trolling my games, and please stop trolling everybody. So, thank you for watching this, everybody, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Be a bit smarter. Bye, everyone.